is we're going to do a fly called the Docswimmer. This is a back swimmer pattern. And I came up with this pattern while I was fishing Muir Lake, actually. And the reason being is because I like to fish floating back swimmer patterns and floating boatman patterns. But I also like using what's called a washing line technique. And if you've ever heard of a washing line technique, what you'll have is you'll have a floating pattern as your trailing pattern, and then you'll have a sinking pattern as your point fly. The sinking pattern will sink, and you'll get a washing line, right? And as you strip, you're going to get action here, and you're going to get action here. This is going to float back up, this is going to sink back down. So you're getting a nice action. The problem is I didn't have a good sinking back swimmer pattern. So I went home and started looking through all my junk for something to tie up a nice, quick, simple back swimmer pattern. And from tying up some chronomids a couple days before, I had some midge gill. So with the midge gill, I thought, you know what, I can use that as the wing pad or the shell back. And that's what I did. And then I just colored it up with some marker and it works awesome, really good. So again, I'm using the same hook that I used for that scud pattern. Again, it's the Mustad 3399. This is size 10. Okay, so we're just going to tie in our black thread here, if it wants to.
What size thread are you using?
Size 10.
Thread?
Oh, sorry, 8/0.
Okay.
I thought you said the size hook. 8/0 black thread. And we're just going to tie down the shank of the hook here. Now there are two ways that you can tie this. You can tie the legs in first, or you can tie the chenille in first and then tie the legs in. But I usually tie the legs in first. So what I'm using for the legs is the super stretch, black super stretch floss, Superfly. Okay, and I know some guys use the round rubber hackle. And I personally, just personal opinion, I think this stuff moves freer in the water. It needs less resistance to move the legs. So that's why I like using this. And we're just going to tie it in the center of the hook. And we're going to use these little crisscrosses again. And nice and soft at first so that, again, you can manipulate the legs where you want them. And what's nice about using fairly soft wraps is that you can continue to manipulate the legs throughout the tie. And I never actually really tighten these down that much, just so that I can continue to manipulate them throughout. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back all the way down the bend of the hook because I'm going to tie in some tinsel. And the idea of the tinsel is, if you ever seen a back swimmer on the water, back swimmers, boatmen, what they like to do is they like to live down in the weeds, and they come up, they grab some air, and they go back down again. They're constantly in this U motion, up and down, up and down, up and down. Whereas back swimmers are more like pike. They like to just sit there and wait for and ambush their prey. And what they do is they're upside down, sitting on top of the water, and they got their butt in the water, and that's where they hold their bubble. Both boatmen and back swimmers need oxygen to breathe, so they always have to be up near the surface grabbing their oxygen. So the back swimmers like to sit upside down at the top surface of the water, looking, you know, down into the water for its prey, and when it sees it at lightning speed, it just smacks its prey. And then it sucks all the juices out of its prey. So the idea with this was that it's supposed to represent the air bubble that is stuck to the back of the back swimmer. Now, whether you use silver or gold, to me, it's whatever happens to pop up when I'm tying it in. So I just tie it in, and if it's gold, it's gold. If it's silver, it's silver. I haven't found that it makes any difference whatsoever. If I can even get it on there. So I'm just going to tie this in, and it's gold. It's like a surprise. Some of them are silver, some of them are gold. And we'll just tie that off. There's actually very little of that showing. And whether the trout even see it, who knows. But it makes me feel better that I actually put some thought into it. Okay, so we're going to come back. And what I got here is, this is the midge gill that I was talking about. And I don't know what happened to the packaging for it. I think that's it right there. There we go. So that's the Stillwater midge gill. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 pieces of this. And what I like to do is I like to tie it in almost the length of the hook. And the reason I do that is I used to tie in, you know, just a bit at the back, and then I would get this kind of warped fly where it's really fat in the butt and it doesn't look very nice. So what I like to do with all my materials is I tie it in almost the length of the hook. Close to those legs. Nope. And I cinch it down more on the way back than I do going forward. And that's just so I don't mess up the legs real bad. Okay. The last thing I'm going to tie in here is just black chenille. Nice and simple, nice and cheap. And again, I'm going to tie this in almost the length of the hook, just to keep the profile similar. It is actually simple.
In whose eyes?
Okay, there we go. So the next step, all we do is we wrap around. It's just the legs that are making it look more difficult. And it is something to play with the legs, but the legs are important because I believe that is what the trout key in on the most, is the legs. Those long sculling legs. And we tie up the chenille. And then we're just going to pull over the midge gill, nice and tight. And we're going to tie that off. Some of that down. Form a little head here. Okay, now as far as the legs, obviously you can see these legs are really long. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull them back. I like to keep them long, obviously not that long, but I like to keep them long because, as I said, I think the trout key in on those long legs. So I'm going to clip them right about here. And you can see they're still fairly long on them. And the last step is just to mark it up a bit. So all I do is I just take a black marker, maybe run a line up the back, and then some dots along the side.
Red eyes?
No red eyes, that's too difficult. Keeping it simple. And then I'll just mark up that white tuff on the front there. And that's it, the fly's done. It's nice and simple. And this black, by the way, turns a bit of a gray once it gets wet. And it actually gives it a really nice look to it. And that's it. That is Docswimmer. The Docswimmer.
What did you call that again?
Docswimmer.
Docswimmer.